Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavad-gita, chapter 4, text 10. Vita raga bhaya krodha manmaya mamapashitaha bahavo jnana tapasa putamad bhavamagataha. Being freed from attachment, fear and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. Purport. As described above, it is very difficult for a person who is too materially affected to understand the personal nature of the Supreme Personality, Supreme Absolute Truth. Generally, people who are too attached to the bodily conception of life are so absorbed in materialism that it is almost impossible for them to understand how the Supreme can be a person. Such materialists cannot even imagine that there is a transcendental body which is imperishable, full of knowledge, and eternally blissful. In the materialistic concept, the body is perishable, full of ignorance, and completely miserable. Therefore, people in general keep this same bodily idea in mind when they are informed of the personal form of the Lord. For such materialistic men, the form of the gigantic material manifestation is supreme. Consequently, they consider the Supreme to be impersonal. And because they are too materially absorbed, the conception of retaining the personality after liberation from matter frightens them. When they are informed that spiritual life is also individual and personal, they become afraid of becoming persons again, and so they naturally prefer a kind of merging into the impersonal void. Generally, they compare the living entities to the bubbles of the ocean, which merge into the ocean. That is the highest perfection of spiritual existence attainable without individual personality. This is a kind of fearful stage of life, devoid of perfect knowledge of spiritual existence. Furthermore, there are many persons who cannot understand spiritual existence at all. Being embarrassed by so many theories and by contradictions of various types of philosophical speculation, they became disgusted or angry and foolishly conclude that there is no supreme cause and that everything is ultimately void. Such people are in a diseased condition of life. Some people are too materially attached and therefore do not give attention to spiritual life. And some of them want to merge into the supreme spiritual cause. And some of them disbelieve in everything, become angry, being angry at all sorts of spiritual speculation out of hopelessness. This last class of men take to the shelter of some kind of intoxication, and their affective hallucinations are sometimes accepted as spiritual vision. One has to get rid of all three stages of attachment to the material world: negligence of spiritual life, fear of a spiritual personal identity, and the conception of void that arises from frustration in life. To get free from these three stages of the material concept of life, one has to take complete shelter of the Lord, guided by the bona fide spiritual master, and follow the disciplines and regulative principles of devotional life. The last stage of devotional life is called bhava, or transcendental love of God. According to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the science of devotional service, adoshadha tata sadhu sango tabhajana kriya tato nartha nivritti syat tato nishtha ruchistata atha sattistato bhavas tataf prema abhudanchati sadhakhanam ayam premna pradurbhave bhavet kramaha. In the beginning, one must have a preliminary desire for self-realization. This will bring one to the stage of trying to associate with persons who are spiritually elevated. In the next stage, one becomes initiated by an elevated spiritual master, and under his instruction, the neophyte devotee begins the process of devotional service. By execution of devotional service under the guidance of the spiritual master, one becomes free from all material attachment, attains steadiness in self-realization, and acquires a taste for hearing about the absolute personality of Godhead Sri Krishna. This taste leads one further forward to attachment for Krishna consciousness, which is matured in bhav, or the preliminary stage of transcendental love of God. Real love for God is called prema. the highest perfectional stage of life. In the prema stage, there is constant engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So by the slow process of devotional service, under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, one can attain the highest stage, being freed from all material attachment, from the fearfulness of one's individual spiritual personality, and from the frustrations that result in void philosophy. Then one can ultimately attain to the abode of the Supreme Lord. Lord Krishna, in this verse, mentions 3 states of mind, 3 mentalities by which one doesn't become purified. He says that many persons have become purified, but a prerequisite for purification is to be free from attachment, fear, and anger. And Prabhupada gives some examples of persons who don't become purified. He spends much of the purport is describing the attachment, fear, and anger of those who don't become purified. One has to become free from this. So, Ado Shadha Tataha Sadhu Sangaha. One who is preliminarily becoming freed from attachment, fear, and anger, they can develop faith. That initial faith leads one to associate with devotees. So this is an overview. Just leave that door open. Just leave it open. So every time someone comes in and out.
Can I just make is it possible not to use the phone?
It is, yeah.
What was I saying? This is a Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. The process of devotional service, just from the beginning stage up to the highest stage is in these 2 verses. It's given in summary by Srila Rupa Goswami, and in other places that's given in more detail. But the summary gives us an idea to understand the basic principle. Now the beginning is faith, and faith comes from association with devotees. And faith is first of all in devotees. It's not that we can have faith in Krishna without faith in his devotees. We might have faith in God, some ill-defined, vaguely defined idea of God, but that falls in the category of bhaya. One is fearful of having a personal relationship with God. One becomes an impersonalist and speaks of God. I love God. Some vague conception. People speak of love. We should love, but love who? We just love everyone and everything. Vague and meaningless. So love means love for Krishna. And love for Krishna means to accept the reality that there are so many others who are with Krishna and more advanced than me. So I have to go through them to come to Krishna. It's not a very difficult principle to understand. But it's very difficult for those who are too materially attached. Vitaraga, those who are fearful or attached to the impersonal concept of the Absolute. And those who are angry for whatever reasons. If they're angry at devotees or at Krishna, well, how can we believe in God? There's so much suffering in the world. If there was any God, He would have kept my daughter alive. She was suffering. I prayed so much. But anyway, she died. So that proves that there's no God. He didn't do what I wanted. So, anger, attachment, fear, and anger. Those who are too materially attached, in many cases they may be better candidates for pure devotional service than those who are fearful or angry. Because even though they're materially attached, then they haven't they're not actively cultivating aversion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead or His devotees. That's why we find people, even many people who are very much mature and attached, very much in illusion, they can also like our devotees. They have no idea what spiritual life is, and not much interest in it either. But somehow or other they think, oh, this is something nice. Hare Krishna. So that being favorable to them, favorable means who knows what's going on in their mind. It's something that appeals to their sense of sense gratification. It's said they think, it's something nice. Why exactly? They don't think about it too much. They don't think about anything too much. But they're not likely to become devotees very soon, but because they're not against the principle of Bhakti, they're not against devotees, and they even have some appreciation in their very materially attached way. So they have some appreciation of devotees. So their condition is not so bad. Those who are fearful, those who are deliberately cultivating an impersonalistic understanding, they're in bad shape spiritually. Although they think I'm doing very well, and they look at the devotees and think that well, that's okay. Or they might look at them and say it's okay. Someday they might realize that they're on the path. This Ravindra Swarup Prabhu told that one time in the Philadelphia temple, one person came up to him and said, I'm very pleased with the way you're worshipping me here. So, Mayavadi Krishna Aparadhi, they become offensive to Krishna. Although we do find people who are suffering from this disease of considering themselves to be supreme, but they're not actively cultivating envy of Krishna. Many of them are. So they may be weaned off impersonalism if they haven't committed themselves to it very strongly. Because often we find just like you'll find someone who's committed to impersonalism and thinking I'm God, and they go on the side of the hill to meditate, and by my meditation I'll make the sun rise. They think like that, but then it happens that there's just clouds and it rains, and they're sitting on the side of the hill and they begin to realize, I'm not God. I was going to make the sunrise this morning, but it didn't happen. God had a different plan. It must be someone different to me. So they may, if they are in their spiritual meanderings, they may, if they're not too much cultivating this enviousness, they may, by the grace of the Lord, suffer so much that they realize that I have to submit myself to someone. Many of our devotees went through this kind of almost metaphysical journey and ended up, by the grace of Srila Prabhupada, at his lotus feet. Either an anger, but those who are very much against, who are angry, who reject, no, there cannot be any God. Or they may be, Jesus is the only way. What was this? Satan. This Krishna is Satan. They'll say like this. Here in Dublin, years ago, we're distributing. Who knows how many boxes of Ishopanishads we did. We were there for weeks. I used to be outside the post office. So, day after day after day. So one time a priest came up to me, because on the cover is Kshiradakshai Vishnu with the Sankarshan, the snakes. He pointed at the snakes. Satan. So they can see bad. It's very bad. So such persons, they become angry at even the idea of God. Most atheists, in one way, they're more preoccupied with God than the theists, because most people who talk about God, don't talk about that. Talk about something. Let's not talk about that. many people, they feel it's a kind of embarrassment for them. They feel uncomfortable if you start talking about God. At least in merry England over the water, in Ireland nowadays, but in England in general, if you might, it's a little impolite to start talking about God. It's like considered, even to mention, it's like you're proselytizing or you're invading my space here. What are you talking about that for? So, but the atheists, they're not only averse to, they're not only allergic to the subject of religion and God, or not just uninterested, but they actually feel very strongly about God, but just in the wrong way. They're against it. They become angry. God. They actually, they say they don't believe in God, but actually they do, because how can you disbelieve in something? If you're so much against God, then there must be something to be against. So they have some idea of what God is, and they say they disbelieve as to try and make him, like a magician's trick, puff into thin air, but he doesn't. If people say to me, I don't believe in God, I say, well, which God don't you believe in? Can you tell me? What is that God you don't believe in? And if they start to describe him, then that means there's some entity. So, and even if they say, you could say, well, probably the God you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. This God with the long beard, he's so busy, he doesn't have time to shave, and he's been a long time up there, and he's very old, and he's getting worn out from throwing so many people into hell with no hope of redemption ever. I don't believe in that God either. That's why I became a Hare Krishna. The God they taught me about, I thought, I'd rather go to hell than see that guy. He's so merciless. He's so merciful that if you don't believe in him in one life, he throws you into hell forever, burning. I'll go. At least down there I can go like that to him. There's nothing to lose. So, that's not God. That's your conception. You can be angry against that. But Krishna is very sweet, and very kind, and very loving. And if you insist on being like Hiranyakashipu, then after many lifetimes you might be fortunate to have your abdomen ripped to pieces by that person you don't believe in. Just to prove, you don't believe in me? Well, here I am. Still don't believe in me? You only believe if you can see. Okay, well, I'm here. Nrsimhadev to Hiranyakashipu. So, but most are not fortunate. They simply, with this anger, they become angry against everything. And though they may speak of humanism and altruism, but actually this hatred of Krishna, this enviousness of Krishna, spreads to envy of other living beings. So even though they may smile, and they're writing so many books nowadays, the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. The beginning of all of these was How to Win Friends and Exploit People by, who was that by? Dale Carnegie? Yeah. But actually what it means is, influence people means that, it means that if you're directly trying to exploit them, then they'll back off. But if you pretend that you like them, then it's easier to cheat them. That's the underlying message of that book. And then it's more, now we have the 7, and that was years ago. There must be so many more books on all this thing, how to be nice, how to be good. These books are so popular means that people in general are not nice and they're not good, because they have to be told about it and they have to learn about it. And then you find that this Stephen Covey, he merged his company with some other be good, be nice fellow, And then they had a big fight, and they didn't disagree. So in the material world, everyone is envious, and they talk about being good and being nice and this and that, but it's all theoretical, because every jiva who is envious of Krishna is out for himself, and he may extend the field of his sense gratification, but his perverted tendency, his tendency to love Krishna having become perverted, he may think, well, I'll be good, and I'll be nice, and then I can feel good about myself, and everything will be nice in this world. But in some ways, the Satanists, they're being more realistic. That's what they say. The Satanists, they say, well, we're just being realistic. The Christians, and they worship God, and but they want material gain, and we worship Satan and we want material gain. So we're just being realistic about it, that's all. He's the boss down here. So we're here, and you're asking something for God and for some material development. That's what they say. You're worshipping God, we're worshipping Satan. We both want the same thing. But just we're going to the local regional manager who can get things done quick down here. So they talk about being good and being nice, but in Bhagavad-gita, Lord Krishna says the same. Advaishta sarva bhutanam. Being nice to every living being. The Greenpeace, they want to be nice to the threatened species of grasshoppers and grass. And to do that, to be nice to the grass, the threatened species of grasshoppers, they might blow up some human beings who are not so nice to the grasshoppers. So their non-enviousness of the grasshoppers becomes envious of those who are anti-grasshopper. You follow that? Yeah. So they've done that. I don't know what their policies are, but once in Sydney Harbour, I think it was, they bombed some French ship that was going to supervise some nuclear explosion. They killed the people inside, not surprisingly. So that was Greenpeace. They sent them to a peaceful, I don't know if the water in Sydney Harbour is green, but it might have been blue peace, whatever the colour of the water was. Not a very peaceful way to go. Anyway, the point is that it must be hypocritical, and it cannot be sincere unless one is focusing on the center, Krishna. Then there must be turbulence. Being nice to someone in this material world means ipso facto, that if you want to be nice to someone in this world, because this world is based on exploitation, to try to benefit one living being means to dissatisfy another. It's unavoidable. There cannot be all-embracing love without loving Krishna. So these are the mistakes of the philosophers, pop philosophers, management gurus, and all this kind of thing. And anything. They may teach some techniques like how to control your anger, breathe deeply, and something like that. So that it helps, but in a symptomatic way. Doesn't get to the root of the problem. The root of the problem is envy of Krishna. So this anger, being against Krishna, is very dangerous. That will spoil our spiritual life. Now Prabhupada gives the example in the purport of those who are angry at the idea of any god, and so they become voidists, or they take to intoxication, they become totally frustrated. There's another kind of anger that we see in devotees. It's not unusual that devotees come to our movement idealistically, which we should do, because we have an ideal. If we're not idealists, then we're dogs and cats, because dogs and cats don't have ideals. For them, there's eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. So devotee is looking for the highest, the best, that which is ideal, and may give themselves very sincerely, and then find out that what they have given themselves for in full faith, actually they're being cheated. It's not unusual to find that they're working very sincerely, and then they find they're doing Sankirtan, making collection, and then they find that the treasurer is putting it all in his own bank account, his own personal bank account. I mean, I don't know of any specific case like that, but it's just a theoretical example, and there are so many examples. So, they tell you, well, don't worry about your health. It's so, you're not the body, and you get sick like anything. And then they say, well, we didn't promise to pay your medical fees. So this kind of thing goes on. I remember years ago anyway, there's no use. You all know so many stories. You are the story. We are all part of we're all part of the story, either this side of the fence or that side of the fence. If you go higher up in the chain, you have more chance to be on the side of the fence that's being railed against. Just like in Nazi Germany, the people who were torturing and sending gypsies, Jews, and homosexuals and Poles and others to the concentration camps, they were ordinary people in many cases. I mean, it wasn't that they were the ordinary people who, next door in the morning you see them is going to work and say, hello, how are you? Oh yeah, very good, thank you very much. And how's your little kiddie? Well, she's a little sick. Well, get better soon. And nice, Herr Schultz or whatever his name is. Nice to see you. And then Hitler comes to power, and he becomes appointed as an officer in a concentration camp or whatever, or a local area rounder-upper of all the local Jews, Poles, Gypsies, homosexuals, anti-Nazis, etc. And he was just an ordinary man. And that we find in many cases, in so many cases, in Cambodia, in Serbia and Croatia. There's so many atrocities, really nasty. When those people over in the Balkans, they get nasty, they're pretty good at it. Maybe more, even than the Germans.
Something like that.
No. But the Germans, that only happened for a few years, but in the Balkans, they have a whole tradition of it, going back hundreds of years, how to be exceptionally inhumane. So, if you don't, if you overeat or something, then you can read some stories of the Balkan Wars, and then you can, relieve your stomach by vomiting it out. It's very nasty. So, but in many, just be ordinary people, right? It's not that everyone they were reading books about how to torture others, but they got caught up in it. So, those who are complaining that, well, in ISKCON this happened and that happened, but quite likely if we were exploited by a leader, but if we had been in a position of leadership, we might have been doing the same thing ourselves. Or I could say, I must have been doing the same thing myself. So, but you could say it's natural that people feel disaffected. I came so sincerely, and I worked so hard. It was all for Krishna, and now these people are doing like this, and they're doing like that. And it may be true. In many cases, it may be true. Of course, it may be also that the person we're accusing of, we tend to, the person or persons or the whole institution that we're accusing, it may be that our vision of it is not fully clear. And it may be that the persons who are doing so, doing what they did, it may not have been, what we consider to be exploitation may not have been actually, in many cases. I mean, we could all say, they have this child abuse case now, but we could all say, I gave up my youth and I could have been a big company manager or a big heart surgeon or a big factory worker or something. But because I was brainwashed by these Hare Krishna people, I went out and I gave up my life, so I should also sue the Hare Krishna movement for millions of dollars. I won't buy your youth back, of course. But anyone could say they're abused. Now, they're not saying that there haven't been excesses and very great ones, but at the same time, it's also a question of vision. We find in this, let's go back a bit, it's a question of vision. How are we supposed to see everything? Through the eyes of the United Nations Charter of Human Rights, that was proposed actually. It came up in ISKCON Communications Journal some years ago. How is ISKCON doing according to the United Nations Charter of Demoniac Human Rights? Demoniac because they don't recognize Krishna. They think that they consider the human rights which they have invented, these are self-evident principles, but they don't take the principles coming from Shastra, and they have all these bogus ideas that every human has equal right to this and that, but that's not according to Shastra. Everyone has equal right. There's a question of qualification. A Brahmana has more rights than a Shudra, because he's more qualified. Why should you give the same rights to an ignorant person as to a cultured, trained person? So the very idea of the very concept of the United Nations Charter of Human Rights, from the very beginning it's demoniac, because it denies, although it sounds very good, fairness, justice, and the French Revolution, égalité, fraternité, what is it? Liberté. And so their liberté was the liberté to guillotine so many people. And the same thing, Afghanistan, Iraq, in the name of humanism, democracy, love, peace, etc., etc. Bombing, and anyway, whatever's going on in Iraq, we all have a general idea. So, it's because we want to make democratic, we want to give them the gift of a democratic society. And if they don't want to take it, well, we'll damn well force them into it and kill them and this and that.
We'll kill them democratically.
No, there's no democracy in war. You have friends and enemies. So, you have friends and enemies. So it's all politics, lies. That's why I always say that Hitler in many ways better than Bush, because at least he said, we're Germans and they're hell to you. We're going to invade you and kill you and this and that because we're better than you. But in modern doublespeak, as George Orwell saw, it was coming, that the ministry of love makes propaganda and the ministry of peace, the ministry of truth tells all lies, and then the ministry of peace makes war, and then the ministry of love, I don't know what it does, something. Anyway, that's wrong. I can't remember what it is. So here's doublespeak. So anyway, a devotee has a different vision, sees through Shastra. Very valuable in this regard is the story of the Avanti Brahmana, who was a real jerk in modern language. And he wasn't a nice guy at all, and then he was more or less forced to leave home when circumstantially he lost all his money. He was a real creep, but as long as he had money, people kind of cooperated with him. But then when he lost all his money, then they had no reason to be nice to him anymore, or to pretend they liked him. So they threw him out of his home. And then he was just... previously people respected him because he had money. When he didn't have any money, then he was forced to beg, and even he'd get some food and someone would come and spit in it, or urinate on it when he was about to eat it. They'd call him all bad names and so many things. But then he realized that, well, here I am. There's nothing I can do about it, and it must be due to my past sinful reactions. So then he became Krishna conscious. There's nothing I can do to stop these people behaving like this. And I must have done something to deserve it. Certainly I deserve it. But anyway, let me fix my consciousness on Krishna. So that's very elevated, of course, to become so detached. Mostly we become bitter because we're very attached. We think, well, I did so much, and then there should have been the result. People should have appreciated it. So naturally we don't like it when we feel we're cheated. And that's happened so many times in our movement. I'm just cheated. I in full faith. And then I gave myself, and then I find this person is doing this, and this person is doing that, and I feel cheated. And it shouldn't happen in a movement with such high ideals, but it's inevitable because we're in the material world, and it does happen, and it will happen. But that doesn't mean that the misappropriation of the Bhagavad-gita, even the Bhagavad-gita, can be and certainly has been misappropriated practically since the time it was spoken. Mostly when people say Bhagavad-gita, it's mostly in the name of Bhagavad-gita people are cultivating envy of Krishna. Krishna's message for the upliftment of all humanity, and people take it and use it exactly for the opposite purpose that Krishna spoke it. To get us out of Maya, and they take it to be in more Maya. That is, they're pretending they're out of Maya, but they're actually still in the same Maya. So the very nature of this material world is that misappropriation of Krishna's message, misappropriation of Krishna's movement. It's inevitable. So one should, if that happens, naturally we feel angry, but to cultivate feelings of anger, even if justified, blocks our devotional mood, because what happens if we become bitter? Then bitter and sweet, they're the opposite. So Bhakti is sweet, Krishna is sweet. But if we become bitter, then there's no room for love in our hearts, and we see everything as bad and everyone is wrong. So it's very dangerous, even if it's we could say justifiable. The effect is that we go away from bhakti, and we saw this very much in the time of the great reforms from 1986. All happened around that time. The devotees who were leading the charge against the corrupt gurus, they were pointing out, well, this one did this wrong, and that, this, that, and they were right. But those who were the most critical, they all fell down. Because even though they were right, their concentration was not on Krishna. It was on the faults of others. So that is required within an institution. There always has to be, within religious institution, there has to be cleansing. There has to be the endeavor to keep everything pure. It's very difficult or practically impossible. It's almost inevitable that positions will be taken over by persons who are interested in positions, because those who are very spiritual and they're not interested in position. And even if they get the position, they might not be the best one to discharge the job, because they're not so materially organized. So that's inevitable. It doesn't mean that someone who's in that role can't also become pure. It's not that someone who joins Hare Krishna and then becomes a manager, that automatically they become a demon. Although it might seem like that in some cases. But it may be mixed motives, like the demigods. They're devotees, they're managers, and they're doing their service like that. The gopis don't like Lord Brahma. They're angry against him. Doesn't mean that Lord Brahma is rejected by Krishna, because the gopis are his devotees and Lord Brahma is also his devotees. And the gopis are angry that he made us with eyes, with lids, that they blink. So when we blink, we don't see Krishna. So, again, the same thing. If we're put in the situation, then we may do the same thing. And many times, management, we think, well, they did this wrong and that wrong, but it's really not that easy to be a manager in Krishna consciousness. It's easy to point out what they're doing wrong, but it may seem like wrong, but the very nature of this material world is that you just can't satisfy everyone all the time. So from your point of view it might be wrong, but then from someone else's point of view, if you did what you wanted them to do, then they would be criticizing this like that. So some patience is required. At the same time, I'm not trying to be an apologist for everything in our movement, and quite frankly, I'm not very happy with many things in it, and I feel we've gone down the path to a large extent of becoming like a religious institution, which is more institutionalized than spiritually based in many cases. That we become more concerned with running on the show, which is also needed, but then it's required that the buildings are maintained and the flow of money comes in and public relations are good and all this kind of thing. But that maintaining all that is not the goal of the movement. The goal of the movement is to push forward the Sankirtan movement, make people Krishna conscious. So it's easier to focus on the shell or the facilities that are required for that, but that is not in and of itself equivalent to Krishna consciousness. So in many ways, I feel we've become part of this. Almost in Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, from his writing, it seems that he considers this inevitable. He says, what is it, that the church that has the best chance of surviving in this damned world is that of atheism under the convenient guise of theism. You haven't read that Putana article? It's astonishing. It's a classic. So reading that article, actually, that helped me to overcome some of the bitterness and anger that what to do. It's just like, in the political world or the The Karmis, they want to get rid of Blair, you can see from the headlines. They'll put someone else in. They'll get rid of him, put someone else in, but it's not, and then they'll be fed up of him and throw him out too. So it's, they have revolutions and they throw people out. But the same, whoever comes in, they may be idealistic for about 3 days. And then it's just the same thing. It goes on. You can't... It's not that by changing the person that this syndrome is going to change. The real thing that's required is purification of heart, and you can't force that. You can't force that on anyone. You can't say, well, our GBCs, they should chant 64 rounds, and you can say like that, but even if you do it by force, and even if they do follow more spiritual practices, if they're cultivating the anyabhilash bij, the seed of other desires and those to surrender to Krishna, then even the hearing and chanting will only tend to water that. What we can do is water our own creeper, if it hasn't already become so poisoned that by watering it we'll just make more poison. We can attempt our own purification. And in a humble way, as if we feel the inspiration to do so, we can also try to rectify some of the inevitable faults within the religious institution that we've now become members of. But at the same time, we have to see that this, by becoming bitter and angry, even if there are grounds for it, it doesn't help us and it doesn't help anyone else. We may not want to condone everything that goes on all around us, but at the same time, by becoming angry and bitter, it doesn't help anything. And it may turn people away from Krishna consciousness altogether, including ourselves. We have this whole Ritvik movement, which is, they have this magazine, Back to Prabhupada. There's not very much about Prabhupada in there. It's all about, if it was praise of Prabhupada, how wonderful is Prabhupada, that would be wonderful, but it's all dilating on the faults, real, and actually I went through one of them, and actually it's mostly imagined. I mean, I admit that there are faults. We can say faults. Of course, Krishna says in Bhagavad-gita that in every endeavor there is some kind of fault. Savaramba hidoshena. But some of them are quite ridiculous, actually. Like they're saying, Bhakti Charu Maharaj is, he's saying, Bhakti Charu Maharaj says that, we should put Prabhupada in the center, and then he's have his big Vyasa puja. But does it mean that because his disciples are worshipping him, that he's rejecting Prabhupada? That's their ridiculous interpretation. Or Indradumna Swami comes to Moscow, and then he says that, he's noticing that there's less spontaneous interest in Krishna consciousness than there was previously. And this is the proof that all the gurus in ISKCON are bogus. It's just bizarre, so they're... And they call it... Anyway, but the point is that Prabhupada, that's their ridiculous interpretation. Or Indradumna Swami comes to Moscow, and then he says that, he's noticing that there's less spontaneous interest in Krishna consciousness than there was previously. And this is the proof that all the gurus in ISKCON are bogus. It's just bizarre, so they're... And they call it... Anyway, but the point is that they're cultivating bitterness and anger. And it doesn't... We see what is their focus. What are they talking about? we don't find that they're glorifying Krishna. Actually, if they did associate with some of these terrible gurus, they might be surprised to find that they're talking about Krishna. They wouldn't know what they're talking about because they don't, they didn't cultivate that themselves. They might be surprised to find how much they are absorbed in Krishna consciousness. That's what I find. Of course, you could say I'm biased, but how they are talking about Krishna and continuously working hard to maintain Prabhupada's movement and bring Krishna to others. But those who are, just like Indrajumna Swami, they go through all his diary and they find something, and they, instead of seeing all his preaching all over the world, they just see that, he said, now people in Moscow have become, the devotees are not as enthusiastic as they were before, and that they take that and extrapolate it, and is this going to please Krishna? Is this Krishna consciousness? It's produced of an attitude of anger and bitterness in some cases, or in some cases even some of the people, they didn't even have this experience or any particular bad experiences. It's just that this feeling that, I'm superior. I don't need yours. I'm going direct to Prabhupada. Prabhupada, you don't know Prabhupada. I know Prabhupada. They were born after Prabhupada left this movement, and the people who are carrying on Prabhupada's message, they're going on day after day, year after year, doing so. But they presume that you don't know Prabhupada, I know Prabhupada. So it's a very dangerous tendency. There are grounds, we could say. I mean, anyone who comes into this movement will find that there may be many things which may be very difficult to relate to in many ways. Of course, there were so many things. In many ways our movement is actually, it is actually in many ways better than when Prabhupada was here. Well, that's another controversial statement, but definitely our devotees are more mature and less neophyte in devotional service. But certainly our devotees have, so many of them have advanced. So many more books have been distributed, and so many centers open in so many countries. We didn't even have centers in so many places when Prabhupada was here. In Europe, we had centers. We had in Britain. I think in Ireland they'd started something and then closed down again when the manor opened. We didn't have any permanent center in Ireland. We had in France. We didn't have in Spain or Portugal. We had in Switzerland something small. We had in Germany, Sweden, and Holland, and that was it for the whole of Europe. I think one center or two in all of these countries. So definitely the movement, it has spread a lot more. Well, who did that? And the people that you're preaching to, how did they come to Krishna consciousness? Because the devotees after Prabhupada left have gone on working, spreading his mission. So the people that you have got to preach to, that these people aren't following Prabhupada, you can only preach to them because these people who you say aren't following Prabhupada have been spreading his movement all these years. And so they're interested in Krishna consciousness and they know about Prabhupada, not because of you. So we have to be careful to avoid this. At the same time, it would be very foolish just to be completely naive, but it's maybe even more foolish to be totally rejecting, and because in that way then we actually become offenders, because even if we, just like I was saying, these devotees, there was so much against Bhagavan especially, and Bhavananda and this and that, but it seems that Krishna didn't like them being so much against, because even though there were manifest faults on the parts of those who they were against, those devotees who were so much against them, they all fell away too. So that means Krishna wasn't pleased. He didn't like that he was so much against. Because now this is entering the realm of controversy now, mentioning names. Some people are very concerned. Bhavananda has come back, and he's allowed to give classes even. But I wonder, would Prabhupada say, no, he's banned forever? I doubt it, because actually Prabhupada loved him very much. And if we say that anyone is banned forever, then we have to edit the Bhagavad-gita, because Krishna says, apichet suduracha. What does suduracha mean? You say, no, we did that, and that's so bad, and we can't allow any. Well, that's not what Krishna says. Prabhupada was happy to say anyone wants to serve, give them the chance. Even their desire to serve may be mixed up with so many other tendencies. And Prabhupada, to some extent, he was able to keep that in check while he was present. And I would say, because it's very difficult and maybe dangerous to try to analyze what a pure devotee does, but I would say to some extent Prabhupada didn't try to keep it in check, because he couldn't supervise all of his leaders all the time. But he gave them, okay, you go here, go there, do this, do that, spread the movement. And devotees, they may have been exploited, this, that, for different leaders' ambitions or whatever it may be, but Prabhupada accepted their service, so they became benefited by that, whoever took part in that. So it might not be the ideal, but then if we were ideal, we wouldn't be in this material world anyway. So like the Avanti Brahmana, he blamed himself. What I'm getting, I deserve it. That's what the Dharma, the bull, said when he was questioned by Parikshit Maharaj. Who's doing this? What's the cause of your being tortured like this? And he gave so many possible reasons. And he said, ultimately it's fate. I got what I deserved. One who can see like that can remain peaceful in this world. Now, that doesn't mean that we should let Prabhupada's movement be misused, or at least we should try to do what we can within our capacities if we see that something's seriously wrong. And there have been, and there will be things that are seriously wrong. Just like, for instance, often devotees don't know some of the kind of things that happened when Prabhupada was present. One GBC member, they were offering meat to the deities. And devotees were going along with it because they're saying, well, it was GBC member. They had so much faith. And they imprisoned Prabhupada for some day. They locked him up in his room, wouldn't let him come out. You don't know about it. We don't know about it. We don't hear about it. But it wasn't that it was all so wonderful. But then afterwards, Prabhupada, just like that GBC member, Prabhupada didn't remove him from the GBC. And the people who locked him up, Prabhupada gave them sannyas and sent them. He wasn't pleased with them, but he didn't reject them. He tried to engage them again. And some of them, one of them died years ago, but others are, still going on in their Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada, he attempted to correct them. He saw there's a tendency to serve Krishna, and he attempted to correct them. That's difficult to do in an institutional setup. But at the same time, we should see that Prabhupada's mood was very broad. There were parameters. It's not that you can do anything or everything. But he was, he wanted to engage people. That was his broad-mindedness. Anyway, these are big topics, but I'm just trying to give some. The main point I wanted to make here is that we should be careful not to become so disappointed that we become bitter and angry, and in this way then there's no room in our hearts for love of Krishna. This Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said to Amoga, who was criticizing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he eats too much. What kind of a sannyasi is he? It was a valid comment. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was just taking the role of a sannyasi. He was eating so much. So from the external point of view, it was a valid comment. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted that. Yes, it's true. But then when Amoga fell sick, he came to him and said, Amoga, you're a Brahmana. Brahmana is supposed to be pure. There should not be envy in the heart of a Brahmana. So even though what he was saying was true, his attitude was one of envy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He had to suffer for that. He couldn't get love of Krishna. He was blocked from that by his realistic analysis. There's nothing wrong with what he said, it's true. Nothing wrong from the empiric point of view, but from the devotional point of view there is. What is that? Nityananda jali shur bari jai tatapi o shema Nityananda rai. Even if I see Nityananda going in a bar, I won't think, oh, just see he's fallen. I think, well, must have some reason for doing it. Hare Krishna. Now, we're going to have comment from Tribhangananda Prabhu. So he takes pleasure in being bent in 3 places.
I'm seriously bent in many places.
So he might bend everything I say. I'm sure that, actually I'm speaking to you, but in another, I don't know how you're all going to react, but I'm fairly sure, can't say for sure, that you might not accept everything I say, but you'll think about it. But among certain people, if you were speaking, I wouldn't have got through. There would have been, you can't say that, this, that. So it's for such persons, or before you become like that, or before you become so disgusted. Oh, I remember here once, Rath Yatra in London, we were going along and I saw Bhajahari Prabhu on the other side of the road. And the look on his face, it looked like, look, seeing all the devotees chanting and dancing, he looked me in the eye and went like this. My first temple president. But he'd seeing the devotees chanting and dancing, he'd look on, oh look. He came to the Rath Yatra, but he had a look on his face, and just look how you're all misguided, but so he feels that all the devotees are all wrong and this and that, but he himself he's not following the regulated principles, and he sees everything's wrong with the movement. It's so sad. His devotees all chanting and dancing nicely, and he was also doing that once, but now he's become angry and seeing that it's all bad. And there could be grounds, if you see what he had to go through. If you're in a leadership position, you can see so many things which you could interpret badly. Imagine what Prabhupada saw. Saw everything. Even without reading the reports, it sees in everyone's heart. But Prabhupada, he would see all these bad things and say, oh, but there's some desire to serve Krishna. There's some desire to serve Krishna. Okay, let's try and work with that. Yeah, please.
What you've been saying, Maharaj, is very deep and very interesting and very to the point, that we have to protect ourselves. And we have to also study Krishna's words very carefully, because he explains in that verse,
take this.
The principle is that why is everybody working in this world? Because they desire different facilities. And even some living entities are worshipping different demigods in order to get different facilities. But the problem is that the intelligence is distorted by material desire. And as long as the intelligence is distorted by material desire, then what we will see will be a distorted perception of reality. Mm-hmm. That is a fact. So, therefore, in this verse, that many, many persons in the past, after having been freed from attachment, fear and anger, they all became purified by knowledge of me, Krishna says, and thus they all achieved transcendental love for me. So we have to make sure that we are actually focusing on trying to know what is Krishna. And the best way we can actually know what is Krishna is from someone who knows what is Krishna. If we try to follow Srila Prabhupada and try to sincerely and honestly follow the directions and guidance that he gives in his books and his instructions, and try to take that seriously, try to seriously apply ourselves to come to understand transcendental knowledge, then we can actually become purified and gradually come to know what is Krishna and gain love for Krishna, which is the whole point.
Yeah, it's the only thing that matters at the end.
Yes.
There's that hackneyed saying, what is it, at the end of the day. So at the end of the day, if we don't have love of Krishna, then we spoil the whole love.
Yes.
The boatman and scholar story.
Yeah. So this whole principle is there. Prabhupada has actually given us everything. He's actually given us this society for Krishna consciousness, this international society. We see here so many devotees from different portions of the international community. And it is an international society. And one thing we have to remember, that in spite of all the difficulties, which were still there when Prabhupada was there, and Prabhupada was still pushing on, but he made it very clear that this movement is actually his own body. And we can have anger and bitterness and fear and resentment and so many things about this movement, but actually we have to raise our consciousness and see that this society is actually Prabhupada's body, and we become resentful and angry and bitter about it at our own peril, because actually we have to develop love for the spiritual master, for Krishna's best devotee, who is the spiritual master. And if Srila Prabhupada explains to us that this ISKCON society is his body, then we should try to develop love for it, for all its many apparent faults, and actually try to develop eagerness to love and protect the society and take part in this society, because if we look at Srila Prabhupada's 7 purposes of ISKCON, we can get Prabhupada's vision of what the society is actually all about. That is very important. The whole thing is to see through what is Bhagavad-gita. What is Bhagavad-gita but an opportunity to see things through Krishna's eyes, to understand how the whole world is actually going on from Krishna's point of view. And this is what Prabhupada is trying to give us. So Prabhupada, he is also seeing from Krishna's point of view. And by following Guru Parampara, we are learning through the eyes of the spiritual master to see what is going on from Krishna's point of view. We have no choice if we actually want to make our lives successful, but to learn to see things from the point of view of Srila Prabhupada. So if we work hard to try to focus without being foolish as best as possible, of course it may be very difficult because the problem is we are foolish, but we have to try to become intelligent and develop that purified intelligence by following the instructions of the spiritual master. Prabhupada, he would say, yes, the jackals howl, but still the train passes. this goes on. So people will howl so many things about this movement, but still, as Maharaji very nicely pointed out, Prabhupada's mission is still going on. And there are devotees who are still taking the baton and running with it, actually. So Krishna's movement is still going on by his own inconceivable plan. It may be very inconceivable to our dull and twisted and distorted brains, but still the fact is, Krishna's movement is still going on. Lord Chaitanya's movement is still going on. Prabhupada's mission is still going on. And we do ourselves and our spiritual master credit by trying to push forward this Krishna consciousness movement. We do ourselves great credit, and we do Srila Prabhupada credit by trying hard to take Prabhupada's mission seriously and making this our focus. Because if we make this our focus, to quote one of these pop philosophy sayings, but it's certainly something very much in keeping with Srila Prabhupada's mission, is that obstacles are what you see when you lose sight of the goal, actually. So Prabhupada's goal was very much to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, actual consciousness of Krishna. We have to focus on even very basic things like what is the meaning of the words International Society for Krishna Consciousness, actually becoming conscious of Krishna. This is our whole business in life. And if we try to get serious about Krishna and Krishna consciousness, then our lives will be successful. We can not only make our lives successful, we can make Prabhupada's mission successful, and we can make others' lives successful, so we can make a genuine contribution, which will be beneficial for all and sundry. So this we should not forget, that the very simple principles of Krishna consciousness, dasa, 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 and dasa, that the more we become servant of the servant of the servant, those who are actually trying to spread Krishna consciousness, the more we will become successful. Maharaj, thank you for your very nice class. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Before I pose my question, I would like to express my appreciation for your nice lecture and for Shuddhankananda Prabhu's very nice comment, which I like very much. So my question, Maharaj, you said that if we focus on negativity and bitterness, which is going on in our movement, we keep ourselves away from taking nectar from Krishna consciousness. That's true, I agree with that. But on the other side, reality is that in our movement there are so many dharmadvajis, people who are just they are like parasites, trying to take advantage from other devotees and put money in their pockets, run away with money. They are after position like that. Somebody has to sort them out. Somebody has to be there to weed them out. Otherwise they will spread like forest fire. But if we focus, I think there is a necessity for a group of sincere devotees who are trying to protect Srila Prabhupada's movement from this kind of parasites. But doing that, you can't be focused on Krishna. You have to be focused on bitter part of, removing those guys. So I think it's a necessity. Can you comment on that?
Well, what you've asked me to comment on, I don't necessarily agree that it's true that those who you see certain persons in certain positions only for the purpose of putting money in their pocket. Okay, let's give a real life example. I'm sure you've got people in mind. It's removed enough from Ireland to not be locally controversial. There's the GBC in Italy is Madhu Sevita Prabhu, who I knew him when he was in Brahmacharya. It was a long time ago. And I don't go around trying to find, but But it's known that there's criticism of him for his, what could be called a high-rolling lifestyle. And also apparently he's not very good at delegating authority, and he's Mussolini style, they say. On the other hand, he has got all the books of Prabhupada translated and keeps them all in print and sees that they're going on being distributed. So, and also he's against many of the, what we might say, the modernization of ISKCON, or the integration of ISKCON with many of the secular ideas. So it's maybe the picture's not so. Maybe things are more complex than that. There are other leaders I know who, I'm really in a quandary in one country, because like one of the devotees who's very close to me, he's very much against the management, and from what he says, and I can believe a lot what he says, a lot of it is true. But on the other hand, the management is pushing on book distribution, and they're also, they're very much into following like the straight and narrow path. So it's often more complex than we might think. And again, maybe this question is not even relevant, how Prabhupada would deal with it, because we're in a different situation to Prabhupada. We don't have Prabhupada's authority. There's the group management. And the group management, it tends to support this kind of thing, because then, some complaint comes against a temple leader, and then it falls on the other temple leaders to investigate and this and that, but they don't want to remove him because they're afraid that, well, if we set a precedent, then someone's going to come in the next week and remove me. You get the point? So it's very difficult. I mean, what I'm speaking now is after many attempts to get things done, maybe not very practically, or to point things out, but it's very difficult to find anyone to listen. They'll say, yes, we appreciate what you're saying, and you might, and we'll make a committee and this and that. And they make a committee, and it goes into the committee, and it's like the black hole, it goes in and it stays there. Or they make a recommendation and then no one follows it. And you can try. It's a difficult job. I'm not saying things are perfect by any means. I'm not saying that we should just see everyone as a saint in all but that's one side of seeing it, that somehow or other they're serving Krishna. Prabhupada said about one of his godbrothers that he came just like Putana came. He compared him to Putana. But Krishna, he takes the good side. So he removed all the bad things, the poison, and gave Putana love of Krishna. So he said this godbrother, Guru Maharaj could see he's an expert organizer, so he engaged him. And everyone knew he was stealing. But he didn't remove him. Even complaints came. He didn't remove him. And then, and Prabhupada would always say, he's so envious of me. Then when he left this world, one devotee asked Prabhupada, then what happened to him? Prabhupada said he went back to Godhead. He said, well, how did he go? He was so envious. And Prabhupada said, my Guru Maharaj is very merciful. So he was living in Mayapur, and he was, serving the deities, and he kept the institution running. It's a very sacred place, the first mutt founded by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And many of his, he also, many of his followers, they're good devotees. You may say this and that about him, but the line of Bhaktisiddhanta came through. to him. You may say, we may think despite him. But then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he saw the good thing and he accepted that. And I may say, if he hadn't have been there, if there had been someone else, then the movement could have gone on much better. But probably if he hadn't been there, then someone else of the same caliber would have been there. So we have to live in this movement and function expecting that there will be all kinds of strange things. We don't have to take part in it. And if you can do something about it, very good. To a large extent, my days of active campaigning, at least for the time being, they're over. Not that I think things are any better, but it's just that it's not within my capacity. Unless maybe I want to make a full-scale movement and give all my energies to it, but I'm not ready to do that either. Because, it does drag your consciousness down, actually. And you're all the time thinking of this is bad, that's bad. And I think I could probably serve Prabhupada's mission better, that despite all the faults, try to promote the positive thing, and at the same time, not be naive about it. So like that's my vision. You can try, but you were talking about, as so many people are, you were talking as Radhanath Swami, I think he doesn't attend the GBC meetings at all. That's his comment on them. But he doesn't get involved in discussing issues, this, that, but just by his example, he shows what can be and what should be and what can be. So that's one way of doing things.
Example of that, yeah, in my mind. Well, I wrote you through months ago about that there was.
In Rijeka?
In Rijeka.
Yeah, but then the devotees just went on doing what they're doing, and who can? That's another thing.
Yeah, but
no one can stop you. If you want to chant Hare Krishna, no one can stop you. If you want to preach, no one can stop you. And up to date in the Hare Krishna movement, as long as you don't campaign against the GBC, you don't have to, or this and that, you don't have to agree with everything they do, but they won't stop you chanting Hare Krishna. So that's great. It's enough for me.
That's true. But
sometimes I was saying, it'd be a relief if they threw me out or something, but they didn't, so I'm still here. So, but you can still chant Hare Krishna, and there are still plenty of people all over the world, if you want to discuss about Krishna consciousness, they're very interested to hear. So, it can't be that what they're doing is all wrong. If ISKCON was all wrong, then there'd be a different. We wouldn't want to be in it at all. We wouldn't find any sincere devotees unless. Well, that's what the Ritwik Bhadis think, that everyone who's in this movement, they're insincere. Otherwise, how could they stay here? So I wouldn't go as far as saying that like everyone on the GBC is. I know they're not, because I happen to know them probably better than anyone else in this room. I mean, I know the GBC members, and they're all devotees, and they're pretty high level actually. I mean, they're working hard, and they're hearing and chanting, and they're really trying to push on Prabhupada's movement. And it may be that definitely some of them and some of their policies, I really don't like them at all. And I really pray that they don't, that they don't come to fruition. But there are others who don't agree with some of these things, and somehow or other they're not speaking up or whatever. Anyway, we have to respect them all. In my book on Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, which I've been working on for years, it's in the final editing now, and I've written there that there are so many controversies in the Gauriya Math. I mean, ISKCON's, it's children's play compared to what was going on in the Gauriya Math. Really heavy, really very, very heavy killing and heavy court cases. I mean, it wasn't everyday killing, but there was a lot of physical fighting, really bad. It was really heavy stuff. But then I wrote that I'm not going to write about that because it won't help anyone become Krishna conscious. And another thing is that despite all of that, all these mutts and all these people who are involved in that, they continued in Krishna consciousness. So if you look at what's the real history, the thing that's important to us is how Krishna consciousness came through. And as far as everything else is concerned, well, that's not very important. What is important is how they chanted Hare Krishna, how they preached Krishna consciousness, how they worshipped the deity. That's important. Hare Krishna.
Just say one thing, Maharaj. We can understand that in this material world, the nature of it is that everyone is to some extent unqualified. Even Lord Brahma, by virtue of the fact that he has taken birth in the material world, he is also generally understood to be a conditioned soul. And Krishna puts different living entities in different roles by virtue of their consciousness and their desires and their suitability for the role that they have to do. And it's a very telling point that if there's no one suitable to take the role of Lord Brahma, then Krishna personally incarnates and does it himself. So it isn't that everyone may be in all respects 100% suitable. I mean, see the example of Lord Indra, the king of the demigods. I mean, he's a great devotee, and Krishna is very, very kind to him, even though he gets into fights personally with Krishna. And, there's so much trouble that he, so many things that he does that one may think is really very strange or abominable. But still, Krishna favors him very much because he's his devotee. And still, Krishna supports him, actively supports him. Indrari vyakulam lokam hridayanti yugatida. Krishna is always supporting him, and he comes from time to time to annihilate the enemies of Indra. So what to do but try to align ourselves with Krishna and his representatives, and try to appreciate that we're all somewhat defective, and therefore Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us a very wonderful verse, his third verse of the Shikshastakam, which can really help us through the most impossible difficulties. This Trinadapi Sunichena Taroriva Sahishnana Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari. That one can chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and ready to offer all respects to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. So this is something to our great advantage. If we take this to heart, then we can actually make progress in our chanting of Hare Krishna and make our human life successful. It's a very intensely, amazingly, crucially important gift for us in the process of chanting Hare Krishna. That in this way we can learn how to chant nicely and actually get ourselves